Hello and welcome to the AIM webinar series. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping notes I will be going over. First, it's a policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. The AIM collaboration and work product policy states that committee meetings or webinars like today are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM's developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. Some additional housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded. As a registrant, you will be notified when the recording is available. We will also have a brief Q&A at the conclusion of the panel. To take part in this, please submit questions via the Q&A option at the bottom of the application screen. At the end of the webinar, I will highlight the contacts of the panelists and AIMs if you would like us to answer any additional questions. So let's get things started. Jeannie Duckett, the Senior Manager of Food Technology Solutions at Avery Dennison, will be giving an overview of this exciting panel on blockchain offering a secure supply chain and brand value through NFTs. Jeannie, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Mike. So I'd like to welcome you, panelists and audience today to the AIM panel on secure retail supply chains and consumer value. And I am very pleased to be here with such a great panel of global experts to discuss this subject. My name is Jeannie Duckett, and as Mike mentioned, I work for Avery Dennison in enabling the global supply chains to interoperable standards from source to consumer. I'm also the chair of the board of directors for AIM North America, and I'd like to thank you for attending this panel today. The panelists will introduce themselves. Rob, would you like to go first?
Hey everyone, I'm Rob Wood. I'm the Director of Global Field Applications, DENIV.
Thank you, Rob. Mark, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. I'm Mark Manning, founder and CEO of iTrace Technologies. iTrace has been helping brands around the world secure their supply chains against counterfeit, diversion, and gray market trading.
Thank you, Mark. Scott, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone from Brisbane, Australia. Just great to be here today. I have basically about 22 years of experience in IoT and smart card RFID technologies, about 7 years experience in blockchain technology. So these days I'm consulting for Zhugang Technology Connections, helping companies create their own blockchain world, particularly NFT worlds, but also supporting other technology related business building or M&A activity. So great to be with you here today. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Scott. So why are we still talking about blockchains? Well, just this last December, the World Bank commented that blockchain technology has this potential to transform governments by building trust. And we're going to talk a lot about today this concept of trust. So over the past few years, governments around the world have been experimenting with blockchains for a wide variety of applications, including land registration, educational credentialing, healthcare, procurement, food supply chains, and also identity management. Back in the 1970s, the Nobel Prize-winning economist Kenneth Arrow observed that the lack of mutual trust represents a distinct loss to economic systems. He wrote that virtually every commercial transaction has within it this element of trust. Perceived trustworthiness or the high confidence of involved parties is the basis of trust. Arrow pointed out that high trustworthiness lowers both monitoring and transactional cost for all parties involved. So today we're going to briefly review what a blockchain is and what cryptocurrency is doing for blockchain in order to level set our audience. And then we're going to discuss how non-fungible tokens or NFTs fit into this ecosystem. Mark, what is a blockchain?
So a blockchain is a record of transactions that cannot be altered once they've been recorded. So the way we like to think about the blockchain in simple terms is if anyone here is old enough to have written a check and had a checkbook ledger, they would have written in that ledger the amount they wrote for that check and keep an ongoing running balance of their checking account in that checkbook ledger. So that's a record of transactions that occurred. And as anyone knows, when they've written in that checkbook ledger, if you have to change a transaction that occurred weeks or months before because you made a mathematical error, you've got to basically rewrite the whole ledger. And you're rewriting those transactions all the way through. The blockchain is a very similar kind of thing. Imagine that every time you wrote in your checkbook ledger that you paid a check or you were paid, you sent a copy of that checkbook ledger to 100 of your best friends. And they all kept the same running ledger or same record of your account every time you made a transaction. Now, if any one person wanted to change a transaction, the accounts or the ledger, the book, would not match up with the other 99 people that had a copy of that ledger. Therefore, it becomes very obvious when someone tries to change a transaction or change a record in the blockchain. That's what makes blockchain very, very secure for recording transactions and recording events or recording records in a very encrypted, very secure way. You can't go back and change a transaction in the checkbook ledger unless everybody agrees to do that. And it being transparent in that way enables everybody to monitor those transactions and see what's going on that blockchain. So again, a blockchain is a very, very secure record of transactions that is immutable and can't be altered.
So thank you, Mark. So for clarification, a blockchain, is it like an Excel database? Is it a cloud-based technology? So how exactly does the storage mechanism work?
So blockchains are created by nodes or servers that are connecting together. So every time you would have sent out a copy of your checkbook ledger, it's basically, in the digital world, that is somebody having a node connected to that blockchain. And they are running that blockchain software on that node or server. It's just a basic computer. And that computer is talking to the other computers and getting an update every time a transaction occurs. So it's really just a database within a server that is recording transactions, and those transactions are duplicated across all of the other nodes in that blockchain network.
Thank you. So how does cryptocurrency fit into all this?
Yeah, cryptocurrency is a great use of blockchain. It's one of those applications that just makes sense for a blockchain ledger. In a cryptocurrency world, you want to be able to record transactions and record the transfer of tokens or currency or value or amounts between different parties. So having a secure, immutable ledger that everybody is monitoring in a transparent way to be able to process those transactions and record the ownership of various components of that cryptocurrency to different people, i.e. their wallet, for example. That's what blockchain enables underneath cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is the application and the use of tokens to purchase things, to transfer value. The recording of those purchases and that transfer of value is done using a blockchain ledger exactly the same way as with your checkbook. When you bought something, you wrote the check out, you recorded that check in the checkbook ledger, and if you were in the blockchain world, you'd be sharing that checkbook ledger with 100 of your friends. So being able to do that in a digital way, in a transparent way, with participation from many, many different parties is what makes cryptocurrency a secure transfer or transaction of value.
Thank you. So, hey, Rob, can you talk a little bit about how AIDC, including NFC and blockchain, work together?
Yeah, sure. So when you look at RFID and NFC, combined with blockchain, it just adds another layer of assurance, a higher layer of security, higher level of security. And when you combine it with the various levels of authentication validation that ties the ownership to the physical object while making a carbon copy of the transaction in a decentralized database or ledger, in addition, it gives, especially with NFC, it gives you the ability to have secure authentication, tamper evident, both physical and digital. And when you combine it with the blockchain ledger, it adds additional level of security, such as proof of origin, proof, ownership, transactions, all can be accessible from a smart device. You can do a public NFT type lookup, for example. Blockchain, other ways we've done it in the past has been through a HSM server, for example, and that's more centralized, that has digital keys. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what you're talking about is willing to put that globally unique identity into a data carrier, whether it's an NFC tag, which has benefits, brain RFID, or even a 2D barcode, can start building that trail of trustworthiness by tying that identity to the blockchain. Scott, can you talk a little bit about where the blockchain begins with brain RFID or NFC, and how's it managed? Does it go away after the tag's manufactured, or how does that relationship work?
There's a couple of different ways in which you can integrate RFID or RAIN or NFC into the chain. Certainly, some of the silicon manufacturers have been advancing their technology over the years to make it easier from an onboard firmware perspective on the chip to actually facilitate direct connectivity into the blockchain. But what we're seeing, and I think Robert started to touch on that, was really the added security of tamper-proof type tags in the NFC world that can further enhance the connection of the physical to the digital. So the blockchain world is very much digital, and obviously we're wanting to have still strong security and identification of the asset to which it's referring to. So from that perspective, that's where the connection comes, and it's really a very important element to have that connection of the physical to the digital.
Right, so you can use that connection of that real item, whether it's gold or a drug or an aircraft part, to start building that identity to that blockchain, to start build that trust. So now
exactly, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Do you have any comments you'd like to make, Mark?
No, I totally agree with Scott. Connecting the physical item to the digital ledger is the key piece to a secure track and trace application that's going to be able to track and trace physical items. If you can't securely connect the physical thing to the digital, it doesn't matter how secure your digital data is. It's not a secure environment.
So that brings us to, let's start moving a little bit into non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. NFTs are kind of designed to give you something that can't be copied, so a unique item. So you have ownership of this work, and so the artist still retains the copyright and reproduction rights, just like a physical artwork. So kind of like the way I like to think about it, that makes sense to me, is if you liken it to art collection or physical art collection, anyone can have a Monet print. I have one, but only one person can have a Monet original piece of art. I do not have that. So, but in addition to the art, you have the fuzzy monkey NFTs drinking coffee on the blockchain. But one of the more obscure or unique applications of NFTs was flowering toilet paper. So the very surprisingly tech-savvy toilet paper manufacturing Charmin introduced digital rolls in 2021. Every NFT toilet paper was uniquely designed, so it was a unique item with flowers and grass, and cost about $4,000 per roll. According to Charmin, it only kept 1 cent of this transaction, and the rest of it was donated to charity. So Scott, so now that we've looked at some bizarre implementations of NFTs, what exactly is an NFT?
Well, I think you've thrown me, Jeannie, on that analysis. That's one of the more novel applications, but if it supports the donations to charity, I think that's a very good example of how NFTs can be used. NFTs are a immutable digital unit that is stored on the blockchain. They are what we call minted. So generally they're produced or generated in the chain at the time in which they're associated to an asset, whether that be a physical asset or whether it be a digital asset. So essentially it's immutable, it's non-fungible. So it's not like a cryptocurrency, but it uses the framework of a blockchain to exist in the digital world and be validated in the digital world. It can be your unique money, or it can represent many different prints of that money. So you can apply that to different market segments. So it can be used for validation of specific assets, like expensive pieces of clothing or artwork, for example, electric vehicle batteries, that type of application. Or it can be applied to collectibles, like baseball cards. And really, you can have your print number 523 out of 1,000 can still be unique items sitting within an NFT that sits on a blockchain and then can be traded. But you're not trading it as a cryptocurrency per se, where the value fluctuations happen and where you have fungible currency. It's essentially they're identifying a specific asset that sits on the chain.
So that's interesting. So in some ways, as we talked about the power of globally unique identity stored in a data carrier, whether it's a RAIN RFID or an NFC tag, creating a representation, an NFT also creates a unique, globally unique representation of either a single instance of a Monet print, or in fact, as you pointed out, the original Monet. So Mark, how do you see the impact of NFTs on blockchain?
So we've actually deployed an application recently where the NFT on the blockchain is a secure token that is printed on a physical certificate. And in that case, the organization we're working with is called the Futurist Institute. And the Futurist Institute issues professional certifications. And they want to ensure that people are not faking or misrepresenting their professional certifications. So we are using our secure identifier that is printed on a certificate. That image of that secure identifier is captured when the certificate is issued, along with the metadata about the person that has achieved that qualification, what the exact qualification is, and which organization they qualified under. And that image is stored on the blockchain, along with the metadata, as an NFT that is then a representation on the digital ledger of that physical certificate. Now, using a simple iPhone app, anybody who wants to verify the qualifications of this person, whether they're claiming they're a certified futurist, or even potentially whether someone was going to be claiming they're a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, whatever professional or academic certification they may have achieved, someone with a mobile app now can scan that marker on the certificate, look at the person's driver's license, passport, or whatever to get their identity, and compare that to the information that is coming back from the blockchain ledger associated with that NFT. Now, the key to this is using an immutable ledger in this case prevents somebody paying to have their certification changed. So, if they went to a university and they decided they wanted to give somebody, $20,000 to change their degree or give them a degree that they didn't actually earn, that's not possible in this case. So the NFT in this case is tying that professional certification or that degree to a person on a blockchain ledger that is immutable, can't be changed, and is verifiable by anybody using the mobile application. So that's where we're seeing these kind of applications coming along. I think I said at the last conference we presented at that I didn't see people spending $2 or $3 million on pictures of monkeys because there was no value in it. I think where the real business value is going to come along are these applications that are based upon these kind of blockchain implementations that are securing real physical things and allowing people to verify and validate them, whether it's products, aircraft parts, professional certifications, or otherwise.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I add to that at all?
Please.
Can I add to that? Sorry, I totally concur with Mark, except that I think there's a known and there's an unknown. It's essentially we've got to look at the digital world coming in the future, right? So we've got to look at what the internet is going to look like in the future. And from that perspective, I don't think we really know. But I do think that we have a pretty good idea where NFTs can have a strong role in the internet of the future. And that is digital assets, whether that be a digital piece of art or whether that be a gaming scenario where you have an ape walking around the metaverse, for example, which is the digital world that is being created and built out there, and a lot of money is being invested in that world. That is where things like non-fungible tokens can come into play. So I think from that perspective, although now we're looking at that and saying it's an ape or drinking coffee or whatever that may be, and someone's paid a ridiculous amount of money for that, in the digital world of the future, that will have a great more deal of relevance. And I think also the web will be set up to handle the interaction and the validation of NFTs or blockchain transactions far more effectively than what it is today. I think also the element, if I may add, is the importance of smart contracts to NFT or blockchain transactions. And that's one of the biggest advantages of a smart contract, where you actually have a legal contract that is coded into the blockchain. It is immutable. And once something happens, another action happens as a result of that, and it's contracted and it is binding. So I think that we have all these permutations of what blockchain and NFTs and smart contracts will look like and how they will be utilized in the future, which is exciting, but also concerning sometimes as well when it comes to toilet paper or apes.
And I totally agree. I think the applications you're seeing today aren't necessarily going to be the ones that survive in the long term, but certainly the derivatives of them and enhancements to them. Smart contracts, to me, I see the value in them. I just don't think the world is yet set up to count for the guy on the loading dock on a Friday afternoon who's had a few beers for lunch and just wants to get this package out regardless of where it actually ends up going to. And, we could end up with smart contracts being triggered on events that aren't actually what they were supposed to be. So I think there's a lot of work to do with the human interaction of smart contracts that we haven't yet figured out. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on a couple of points that actually both of you mentioned. So back to your educational credentialing, whenever I'm talking in a room full of supply chain people, especially in the food supply chain, talk about the fact that, most everybody is a good actor. Like, over 95, 98% of the actors in the market, they're actually good actors, and everybody wants to know who the other people are. So your example of, paying the local registrar to change your educational credentials is certainly one, case of a bad actor and how an immutable ledger can prevent that from happening. But another thing, for those of us that don't keep very good records at home, just the process of reacquiring your educational certificates can be a hassle, because you have to call the institute, you have to get along with them. Do they take something over the phone, or you have to mail these people a check, which I've done. And so it's actually both cases. It will prevent and build trust in those educational credentialing, and it can also enable and free up a person that has to answer that phone call and, make that copy and send it out. So both cases can be enabled. I agree with you, Scott. Once the monkeys get off the blockchain, I think that there's a number of applications, in digital things that live only digitally that can be enabled by this type of trust. But coming to a more near thing, 2021 is really going to be remembered as the year that supply chains disaster happened. But and in reality, if you actually look at this supply chain bottlenecks, misshipments, they also happen quite often. And they cost companies millions of dollars every year. So from onboarding to production to transportation, NFTs and blockchains can reduce this cost by building that trust, eliminate these bottlenecks, create transparency into supply chain, and basically help prevent the chaos. So Scott, can you talk a little bit about that relationship between NFTs, transparency, and trust in reference to the supply chains?
Yeah, I think we were seeing a very, very interesting world, and the heightened importance of provenance is something that has come to being as a result of 2021. And so from that perspective, that's where the chain, as one element, not all elements, but certainly the chain coupled with data capture, I think that's where the secret sauce lies. And that has many different permutations. What that gives you is greater transparency and trust into the supply chain. It enables you to not only authenticate an object, which is critical, and I think we've seen many, particularly in vaccinations areas in developing nations and things like that, we've seen a lot of problems in that space. But what it does is really give you the ability to have your finger on the pulse and see where a lot of the weak points in the chain are, and how you can create a more efficient supply chain. And I think that's where one of the most critical elements of blockchain combined with automatic data capture come into play, is that you're really looking at how we can optimize the efficiency of the supply chain. And that's what we're all about today. Saving costs, but also really bringing greater efficiency and real-time supply when we need it.
Thank you. I always like to look at a study from the University of Auburn that kind of talks about the efficiencies of supply chains. They were using 8 brands and 5 retailers, and they started out basically with the concept that in-store inventory would make businesses more profitable. So that was the premise. But what they found out is that everything throughout the supply chain is enabled with transparency and trust in the supply chain. Because, you know, people over order to have safety stock, which adds to waste. People don't realize how long they have aging inventory. And you have a number of issues that I don't even think we fully understand yet, that these opaque supply chains have put into the system. Once again, back to Kenneth Arrow, they are economists that won the Nobel Prize. These things all add cost, friction, and time into the supply chain.
Yeah, I think, Jeannie, one of the findings from Auburn, they're a great bunch there, that really looked at simple things like over or under deliveries of object. So the amount of adjustment and time and cost that's applied to, okay, instead of delivering 10 cartons, I delivered 9. The RFID system picked that up. And then you have to go through a manual correction of the account. And blockchain can play a really important role in there to actually automate that correction. So yeah, I see that I only delivered 9. We'll correct that in the chain. So the ledger is correct. And I think that was wonderful coming out of Auburn, which also really started to drill down into some great areas around interoperability within the retail supply chain. It also started to drill down within the impact of RFID and the effectiveness of RFID. But one thing I wanted to mention also was the importance of, in that provenance piece, some really critical elements that go through to the consumer is the validation of source, but the validation of compliance. Compliance to things like human rights, which is more and more in our hearts and minds as manufacturers or suppliers and consumers, and the validation of things such as sustainability and compliance to sustainability element, such as measuring my carbon footprint for the life cycle of the object that I'm using. So there's some really important elements that the world needs to focus on that can be supported through the chain, through the technology.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really good points there. I'd like to unpack a little bit. So back in 2018, the New York State AG, the Attorney General, ran and went out to multiple food service and retail groceries within the state of New York. And they showed that 32% of all the seafood is not what they say it is. It's either mislabeled, and like for lemon sole, 87% of it is in probably most likely another fish. So Mark, iTrace and your company has really been helping global brands fight these issues of counterfeit, gray market, diversion, and production overrun. Can you talk about how NFTs and blockchain enable this?
Yeah, so again, it's as Scott was saying, it's about the provenance of these products and items. And one thing that blockchain technologies are very good at being able to do is to be able to drop a blockchain node into an environment or into a location and have that entity participate in recording the provenance of an item. So in our case, being able to drop a blockchain node into a factory in China so as that factory can record when items are produced and when the component or the part is actually born, and creating that born on event on the blockchain ledger that then can be added to as additional transactions for that part or component occur throughout its life cycle. And so that part or component can be verified on the blockchain throughout its life. The challenge that everybody has with physical items and connecting them to the digital ledger is, how do you know that the item that was recorded on the blockchain in the very beginning of its life is the same item that's being verified or validated 5 or 10 years later in the life cycle of that product? Now, obviously, fish don't live in the supply chain for 5 or 10 years, but if you look at the aircraft industry, aircraft parts have a service life of between 15 and 20 years and get installed on 4 or 5 different aircraft in that time. So knowing the refurbishment cycles, the repair cycles, the maintenance cycles, how many aircraft it's been installed on, is very, very important to the aircraft companies. And it's important for anybody who's looking to purchase a used aircraft part in the marketplace. Because if you can understand the provenance and history of a used aircraft part, validate that part against the blockchain and ensure the part you're purchasing is the part that was recorded in the beginning, adds value to that part. So many, many parts that are installed on aircraft today are used and refurbished. If you're buying those parts, you need to know how many refurbishment cycles it's been through, how many aircraft it's installed on. That becomes important and has value to that part itself. And this is the work that we did with Honeywell around their parts provenance for aircraft parts, and being able to ensure what was important to them, that the part, when it was recorded on the blockchain in the beginning, was the same part that would be scanned 5 or 10 years later. Understanding the authenticity, whether that part is counterfeit or genuine, and being able to then have its whole guaranteed provenance.
And so we got an interesting question from the audience that I want to take now, because it fits so well into what we're talking about. And so back to those educational credentials or that aircraft part, or really almost anything, couldn't you just have another bad actor issue a second NFT with fake credentials, and the second person is needed? They could be a bad person too. So how does NFTs, or can you totally eliminate these counterfeits like the New York AG found?
Not with the NFT alone. The NFT is a component in a system that is preventing fraudulent transactions and ensuring authentication of the product. And this is one of the things that we provide for our clients, is an authentication solution that is able to be verified with a mobile device, but is not easily copied, easily produced, easily replicated by the bad actors that are out there. And that security of the marker on the physical component is one of the important factors about implementing a parts provenance solution that is securing parts to the blockchain. The blockchain and the NFT are a component of a bigger system that is securing the physical item itself, and therefore the data and the transaction that occurs with that item on the blockchain ledger. So I don't think you can say an NFT by itself is going to solve my counterfeit problem, in the same way that you may not be able to say an authentication token on the product is going to solve the whole counterfeit problem. You need all of these components together and the layers that go along with them to provide the end-to-end security, the end-to-end visibility, and then authentication of those particular products and components.
So thank you for that explanation of, those traceability events, or those events moving something through the supply chain, as well as the NFT. Rob, can you talk a little bit about what the impact of, that globally secure digital identity is, and what role it plays in alleviating the gray market diversion and counterfeits?
Oh yeah, I can totally comment on that, and especially working off of Mark as well, because when you look at it, you have black market, gray market, shrink, diversion. So typically, if you look at a standard supply chain, initially it was UPC, right? Product SKU number. Then they went to the SG10. They started unique identification, where you can scan for supply chain that I have 10 extra large shirts of this brand. Well, that's fungible at that point. I mean, there's 10 of them. They have some uniqueness, but it's all kind of held in a database, right? By the brand owner or whomever. So when you implement the blockchain, say you purchase that shirt, it identifies that it's now you purchased it, it's yours, and you authenticate it. You can see that this was authentic shirt. But sometimes in a lot of these situations, you can go to a legit place and buy a black market shirt or something that's gray market as well, where you authenticate and it would say it's not authentic. A lot of issues, especially in just say for shoes. People are buying shoes for as a collectible. They'll take those shoes, they'll clone the shoes, and they'll take them back to the retailer, for example, they return the shoes. But with the digital identity and being secure through blockchain and through secure authentication, when you check those shoes, you know that they are the actual authentic item. And that's the biggest deal there, because really employee theft, which is shrink, and first shift makes your product, second shift makes someone else's products. The main thing is when you put all this technology together, you can strictly really trace it down to country of origin, what shift it was made, all that. And it really opens up the technology to really trace it unlimited.
So thank you, Rob. So to kind of summarize that, so I use the global digital identity that's attached to a physical product, and I capture that data as it moves throughout the supply chain, what some people like to call critical tracking events. And so then if I had a red cashmere sweater that was made in January of 2022 in Vietnam, and then I had the exact same thing made in February of 2022 in Malaysia, you might realize that you could be dealing with a counterfeit type product. So we have another question I'd like to address, and that's when or how is the blockchain ledger created for technologies like RAIN RFID? And so something I talk about quite a bit with different brands is, your story really only goes back as far as your digital identity. And that digital identity can be attached to that item at any point in the supply chain. It could be attached back at the point of origin, at a processing step, or at the back of house of a retailer or food service. But Scott, would you like to comment on that? When or how is that blockchain ledger created for that technology?
That's a broad question. If I was being hypothetical, I would say, if you wanted to, at the time, an RFID chip is associated with an object, with an asset, you could essentially put that into the blockchain world to be found later. You could do that. And so some companies do that, in preparedness for a coming market. My digital ID sits in the chain and it's out there for the world to find and validate. I think in a practical sense, we're seeing the establishment of very strong standards networks that consortiums, particularly, that are saying, okay, this is our chain. It's either open to everyone to participate in and lodge transactional data into the chain and keep upgrading the ledger, so to speak, or it may be only open to permissioned and select few to participate in that chain. And I think that's where you don't have one blockchain for the world at the moment. And that's, we still have different, like we did with the RFID many years ago, we had different standards, different frequencies. It's the same thing that applies at the moment. You have different blockchain protocols that are out in the world. And what I'm seeing is that industries as a whole, or supply chains, are tending to adopt certain platforms that they can therefore utilize as a standard across their industry. Sometimes that may be just down to one company using that across their supply chain and insisting that all the actors in the supply chain use that particular protocol. Other times it may be an industry-based choice that says this is the chain that we're going to use for this function. So it's an evolving space, and I think the world of blockchain interoperability is not yet there, but is coming with the future internet.
So since we're not quite there to that interoperable space, and there are these different, technologies and standards out there, Mark, we really secure physical things to these digital identities, to the ledger, using NFTs and scale it today in a cost-effective manner?
Yeah, so the implementations we were working with right now, as Scott mentioned, are private permissioned blockchains. It's part of the contradiction of blockchain technology and business today, in that people want the idea of a blockchain and the interoperability and working together with folks, but they don't necessarily want the transparency that a blockchain would bring as a public blockchain. So the contradiction between the technology and the use case is, hey, you've got this transparent and open technology that can allow everybody to share, but that's not necessarily what your business wants to participate in or how they see their data being used today. So the implementations that we're working on are private permissioned blockchains, and the companies we're working with are putting this data on the blockchain. It can be exported from that blockchain. The data can be, downloaded from that blockchain. From a scalability perspective, a lot of the challenges we're seeing on the scalability side is the unit cost for technologies that are going to tie the physical item to the digital ledger. So there's technologies out there that are more expensive and in many ways prohibitive to be able to create that one-to-one relationship between the physical goods and the digital ledger. One of the things that we're working on now is being able to provide that low-cost, scalable solution that is able to deliver a very large amount of products secured to a blockchain digital ledger. And there are challenges as well with the speed that transactions can occur on a lot of these blockchains. And that's where a private permission blockchain becomes much faster at recording transactions than, say, something like the Bitcoin network, which is notoriously slow at recording transactions and extremely expensive. So scalability comes with being able to provide these solutions at a lower cost and a lower price point, certainly on a per unit basis, and being able to create that performance that companies are expecting from a transaction database.
So thank you, Mark. So Rob, Identity and CVS use NFC and blockchain in an innovative way to make pharmacies more accessible to people in store. Can you talk about how you guys use that technology and why CVS found that cost effective for them?
Yeah, that's Spoken RX. So basically Spoken RX, we enabled the basically IoT, the prescriptions. So when you sign up for it and you log into it, they give you a description of what the medical or medicine is. So you can, it'll speak it out to you. So with that, that use case is very particular. You have to opt into it. You know, it's housed strictly for that use case. So the scalability of it is probably a little different than being a NFT type blockchain type scenario.
Yeah, all right. But well, certainly there's a lot of CVS pharmacies. Did CVS roll it out to all their different locations? Or is it still, or what point are they in their decision process?
You know, I'll have to defer that to probably Amir, because CVS is one of those that are kind of, the ship's been sailed on. But far as I know, all the locations can have it if they have the enable technology, you know, on the devices. So I don't think it's scaled to every location, but I do believe it's at probably some of the major ones.
Thank you.
Jeannie,
So,
I think also the, if I can jump in there, the use of NFC and blockchain in retail and around a brand is really, really important for secondary markets. So we've seen examples in the marketplace with large, well, eBay is an example, for example, or MCQ Fashion House out of Alexander McQueen out of Europe. You see those companies tagging their objects, not necessarily for the validation of primary sale, but to support the secondary market where those items are resold or traded, where sneakers, obviously, if you're a sneakerhead and you're a collectible of sneakers, they're traded in you, and the validation point is really, really important there. So I think that the combination of blockchain, NFT, NFC, that's where it's starting to really come into play as well in that sustainability element of secondary markets. And you can validate the object and validate the provenance of an object.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like to add to that real quick, because you're totally right. You know, once you buy the shoes, people are turning it into an NFT, right? Sooner or later, it'll be at source, you know, where it's basically, it's an NFT when you buy it. And I think that's the big change we'll probably see in the future.
Yeah, definitely Alexander McQueen did it at source at the production level, and started to go back in the supply chain. Certainly eBay, obviously, they go through an authentication process and validate the object, which is something used in wine as well. You know, if you have an old collection of wine, you need to have an expert come in and authenticate the wine before you could essentially tag it and bring it into the digital world.
So thank you, Scott. So pretty much blockchain and NFTs are here to stay. And they are going to, as Scott pointed out with the metaverse, they are going to enable new business models for brands, which we may not fully realize yet, but there's a couple of examples like Yezi NFTs airdropping from Gap stores with purchases, or Tesla vehicles that use NFTs to unlock features. So Rob, as we wrap up here, what do you think the future holds for RFID and blockchain?
Oh, I mean, I totally feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg, just as we were just discussing, you know, at the needle when they're manufacturing, enabling, you know, uniqueness there versus turning into, at the end, sooner or later, everything will have that uniqueness. And when we, I mean, the potential is unlimited, is limitless. You know, at the end of the day, if we look at it, we're seeing it's expanded from digital art, physical goods, moving into various markets. It's expanding into consumable and disposable smart packaging. It's pharma, healthcare. You know, if you donate blood, you can totally connect that to the person who donated it. Medical records, you know, various other specialty items like art. It could be tennis shoes, as we said. You know, and adding that extra layer of authentication. I think it's discovered that, you know, a lot of these companies are using their own security force to find, you know, all these black markets and gray markets. Sooner or later, it will be unscalable. It'll just be huge. So I think we're at the beginning of it. There's definitely a lot of things that needs to be worked out, you know, but I think we're on the right path.
So, Mark, how do things look for your standpoint for the future of blockchain and NFTs?
Yeah, we've got clients who are using it, implementing it, and driving forward with it today. So we see the blockchain is going to be here to stay. I think, you know, the same as in 2001, pets.com didn't survive the .com bust, but certainly that business model is alive today and is you know, used in e-commerce every day by thousands and thousands of companies. So I think I agree, blockchain is here to stay. The NFT is going to play an important part in connecting physical items to the digital ledger. And there's, as Rob said, there's unlimited applications around what you can do with that once that technology becomes, you know, well understood and easy to deploy.
Thank you, Mark. So Scott, can you wrap us up here? How does the future look to you?
Well, I hope.
In terms of blockchain and NFT.
Yeah. Namaste. I hope that the technology is used to bring greater trust and transparency. I hope that the technology is governed by some strong standards. And I don't necessarily mean sort of government regulation. I mean strong global standards. And I think, you know, we have to come out of this period like any new technology. We have to sort of go through the pain to get the gain. And the pain at the moment is uncertainty in global markets, global supply chains. Once we get through that, I think we'll be left with quality, as Mark started to touch on, and I think that's really important. That quality, I hope, will transition into a new web standard, a new digital standard that we won't be talking NFT. We won't be talking blockchain. It will just be there on a day-to-day basis and part of our expectation as consumers, as buyers and sellers of goods. So from that, I hope it actually does some good for the world. I hope it starts supporting sustainability initiatives. I hope it starts supporting humanitarian and conservation initiatives that essentially we're starting, and also I hope it starts supporting privacy and protection of individuals, and that is such a big concern to me as we go into the metaverse, and the impact that, you know, social media has on kids these days, etc. The metaverse is going to be 10 times that if we don't have the right standards in place to support that. And I think that's where NFT blockchain can play a really important role to support permissioning, to support our rights, but also to support this planet. So there's a bit of a namaste look at the world for you.
Well, thank you, Scott. Certainly appreciate all your experience, and I agree with you. I think blockchain has a good future. Going back to Kenneth Arrow, I think this building the trust and transparency in supply chains, whether it's ESG goals, whether it's inventory optimization, whether it's consumer trust, I think is really going to yield rewards. So that's all the time we have for today. If anybody has questions, please feel free to reach out to us or reach out to AIM and they will contact us. And thank you for attending this session today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Gina.
everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
Gina.
panelists.